Hi, my name is Zev Wiener, and I've been fortunate to be the Maggid Shiur of the Young Israel of Century City Jack Nagel Smichas Chaver program. And the Smichas Chaver program is an incredible initiative founded by Rabbi Goldwicht, who is not only a Talmid Chacham, but a juggernaut of passion for Habatzas Torah and brilliant ideas of how to make Torah learning even more engaging and gripping for people. And it's really been a wonderful journey to be a part of this over the past year. Smichas Chaver is a global program which provides a curriculum for the in-depth study of halacha, where we study sources from all the way back to the Chumash, going to modern contemporary poskim, tackling many of the most relevant and challenging areas of halacha. And it generally is held within different communities, one night a week. And the goal is, there are multiple goals. First of all, it's to know halacha, to master halacha. And we do that through the shiurim, through chazara or review, through quizzes and tests. But it's much more than just knowing the halacha, which in and of itself is a critically important goal. It's about fostering a love for halacha, making it fun and engaging, which we do through the relevance of the different topics. We do it through interactive kahoots, which are online quizzes. We do it through back and forth discussion and many questions and answers about the material that we're studying. And beyond loving the halacha, it's about spreading the halacha, spreading the Torah. And we take the lessons that we learn, and we always encourage people, whatever Shabbos table you find yourself, whether it's with your own family, whether you're eating with others, even if you're not eating with anyone, find someone to share these ideas with. They're made in a very, very transmittable format by which it is not hard at all to share. And we always encourage the participants to spread their love and their knowledge to others. And it's been unbelievable, to see the impact all over the world in our own chabura, as well as in every chabura I hear of people commenting just how much it's done to kindle a passion for learning and for halacha, bringing their daily experience to life. It's been incredible. And so I'm very fortunate for this opportunity. And I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to share a sample shiur of what it is that we do in Smichas Chaver here for the OU West Coast Convention. So at Smichas Chaver, every week, we begin with a machshava piece, a piece of Jewish philosophy, of Jewish thought, usually something about Shabbos, because we've been studying the laws of Shabbos over the past year, and something that can broaden our perspective beyond the technicalities of the halacha, and also to look more at the bigger picture of the spirit. And so for this week, we have a beautiful piece from the Nefesh Shimshon, as Rav Shimshon Pincus, Zatzal, a very noted Talmid Chacham and Makubal, well known to many of us on the West Coast. He's the brother-in-law of Rav Shalom Tendler, and he has written many svarim that deal with a variety of topics in Jewish law, and particularly in Yanim of Shabbos, he's written prolifically on. So this week we have Nishmas HaShabbos Museges Ach V'Rak Al Yedei Tefillah. The soul of Shabbos, the pnimius, the inner essence of Shabbos, is attained solely through prayer. Yeshnam hatoim usvurim ki Shabbos eina zman tefillah. There are those who make a mistake and think that Shabbos is not a time of prayer. After all, shaharei bayom zeh ein mispalalim al tzorchei yachid. On Shabbos, we don't have a long Shmon Esrei. We studied this in Smichas Chaver over the summer. The difference between the Shabbos Shmon Esrei and the weekday Shmon Esrei. Shabbos is a condensed Shmon Esrei. We do not engage in bakashos, personal requests on Shabbos. That might imply that tefillah is kind of de-emphasized on Shabbos. He says, Aval amito shel davar adarabah. He says the exact opposite is the case. Shabbos hizman shel tefillah ba'ofen miyuchad. Shabbos is a special time. In a special way, it is the time for tefillah. Kol pnimius yom haShabbos magia derech hatfilas. The entire inner essence of the day of Shabbos is arrived at solely through prayer. Darkan zochim lenishmas haShabbos. Through tefillah, we reach the soul of Shabbos. Hanusach shel tefillas haShabbos, the nusach, the template, the wording of the prayers of Shabbos is different. Shona minusach hatfila b'mosacho. Bimkom levakesh slach lanu, instead of asking slach lanu, Hashem, forgive us, anu mevakshim b'Shabbos saveinu mituvecha, satiate us, satisfy us with your goodness. Zohi bakasha ha'osekes b'inyanei ha'olam haba. This is a request that deals not just with this world, but with the next world, with transcendence. And this is even loftier than the prayers of the weekday. So, kach masigim es nishmas haShabbos. This is how we attain the soul of Shabbos. And so we see from Rav Pincus the value of tefillah on Shabbos, the power that tefillah has, even if it looks different and even if it's somewhat shorter than the tefillah during the week. Rav Eliada brings a beautiful story that I'll just read, very touching when I read it the first time. He talks about a particular Jew in his 60s that lives in Yerushalayim, but was born in Hungary. And at the age of 2, he was orphaned from both of his parents, and he spent his childhood, Rachmana litzlan, and his adolescence in a communist orphanage in Hungary. So one Shabbos, when this Jew was eating at Rav Eliada's house, Rav Eliada asked him to describe what it was like growing up in a communist orphanage. He responded, it was miserable. They made us work long hours without giving us any love or affection. And he even lifted his hand to show that Nebuch, he had lost part of his finger that had gotten caught in a machine while he was working. And he described the terrible daily routine in the orphanage and just the awful, awful conditions that they faced. When he finished, Rav Eliada said, that sounds so terrible. I can't even imagine what you've been through. I have one question though. Are the children always crying in the orphanage? And he started laughing in Rav Eliada's face. Crying? Are you kidding me? No one ever cries in an orphanage. I never cried in the orphanage, nor did I ever see any other child cry there. The first time I ever cried, the first time I felt a tear roll on my cheek was when I was in my 40s. And a close friend of mine passed away. Rav Eliada says he was shocked. I couldn't understand this. He said to him, I don't get it. If you go into any normal home with children, with parents, you'll see within 15 minutes someone is crying. He took the toy from me. She hit me. It's my turn. The kids should not be crying. These kids shouldn't be crying. They're growing up in a home filled with happiness and toys. Why is it, he wondered, that in the orphanage, where all the kids should be crying, no one cries, but in a healthy home, children are constantly crying? And so the man gave an answer that was brief, but so profound. The man said, I never cried in the orphanage because I had no one to cry to. I knew that no one would wipe away my tears. Children that grow up in a healthy home cry because they know that their father or mother will hear their cry, embrace them, and wipe away their tear. But in the orphanage, there was no one to hear the children's cry. What a powerful message for us to think about. But maybe we don't cry during our davening because we don't deeply, intimately believe that Hashem is listening to our cries. We don't believe that He's going to embrace and wipe away our tears. And so Shabbos is a time to remember that Hashem is always listening to our tefillos. And Shabbos is a time to daven for this deep spiritual connection with Hashem, for the loftiest of ruchnius concepts, and that is how we attain the nishmas Shabbos, the soul of the Shabbos. A beautiful idea from Rav Pincus. Normally next in the SCP Shiur, we would present a number of questions, and I'd throw out a question or two to our participants and would ask for responses. And oftentimes there'd be some interesting back and forth debate. Good svaras, good arguments on each side. And that, again, is a wonderful part of the shiur that we often do. Today, we obviously will skip that part. And then we go to the substance of the shiur. The substantive part, not the substantive part, but the halachically substantive part of the shiur is where we continue on in a topic. And so this past summer, we studied the halachos of Kiddush on Shabbos, how to make Kiddush. And although it's something we all do every single week, 2 times a week, many of us were surprised to learn that there may be things that we're actually doing that are either incorrect or perhaps not optimal. And so one of the areas that we learned that a number of people indicated was fascinating to them, and that they hadn't realized that there was any rhyme or reason to how it should be done, is the conclusion of Kiddush. What do you do after you finish reciting Vayichulu, let's say on Friday night, Borei Priagafen, and the second bracha of Kiddush, and Yibaruch Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos? What do you do in terms of drinking the wine and distributing the wine? Is there any preferential way that a person should be handling that part of the evening? And so, truth is, however you've been doing it, you're probably doing it okay. Meaning you're probably yotzei Kiddush. It's pretty hard to mess it up. The only thing that you're really not allowed to do is to interrupt between once you make the bracha and when you drink the wine. But as long as you're not doing that, you're technically going to be yotzei. But as we'll see, there is a preferred way to do it. And with everything in halacha, the more you understand it, the more you realize I'm doing it this way instead of that way, the more mindful you are of the experience, the more meaningful it becomes to you. That it's not just pouring out wine, you're actually thinking about these halachas while you're pouring out the wine. And again, it brings the experience to life, and it brings you to feel even closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you're serving him not just in the most basic of ways, but even in the most detailed nuances. You feel that you're, in a loving way, giving to him in the way that he would most prefer it, as has been elucidated by our Chachamim. So with that, let's take a look at a number of the halachas. The way we start is we often read it in the Shulchan Aruch. If you have a Shulchan Aruch and a Mishnah Brura, I recommend to read along, and I'll read it here and translate it, and then we're going to piece together. As we'll see, there's a number of snippets at the end of this siman that we're dealing with that give us various details, and I think if we put them all together and compile them, we'll figure out a good protocol of how we can go about making Kiddush and concluding Kiddush on Friday night. So the primary siman in Shulchan Aruch that deals with the laws of Kiddush, there are multiple ones, but one that deals with most of the fundamental issues is siman Reish Ayin Aleph, 271, and that introduces us to what a person has to do on the basic level to fulfill the mitzvah. And so first of all, in Seif Yud Gimel, chapter 13, the Shulchan Aruch writes, Sarich lishtos mikos shel Kiddush kimlo lugmav. A person must drink from the cup of Kiddush. How much? What's the Shiur that a person has to drink from a Kiddush cup in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush? So some people think you have to drink the majority of the cup. That's not the case when it comes to Kiddush. The halacha is kimlo lugmav, a cheekful. A cheekful, as the Shulchan Aruch says, dahainu kol shisalkenu letzad echad befiv v'yera'eh lo lugmav. So sort of one cheekful. If you could imagine filling up one side of your mouth with liquid, that's the amount that you have to drink. Now, it's important to keep in mind, the amount that your cup has to hold is more than a melo lugmav. Your cup has to hold what's called a revi'is halug, but the melo lugmav is what you have to drink. So it has to be full with at least a revi'is, but you don't have to drink the whole revi'is, you just have to drink the melo lugmav. And Shulchan Aruch says, V'hu rubo shel revi'is, that melo lugmav will usually be the robe, the majority of the revi'is, but not necessarily. And certainly if your cup is bigger than revi'is, you're not going to have to drink the majority. You have to drink the melo lugmav. Melo lugmav, as you can imagine, the cheekful is an amount that depends on the individual. Some people have very big cheeks, some people have smaller cheeks, and that will determine how much a person has to drink. So this is the first basic halacha that we learn about drinking the wine of Kiddush, that in order to be considered drinking the wine, one has to have a melo lugmav, a cheekful. Let's keep going. In Seif Yud Daled, we learn a fascinating 3 deos of the Shulchan Aruch, 3 different opinions about who has to drink the wine. Many people don't even realize that there's a discussion about this. Imlo ta'am hamakadesh, if the person making Kiddush didn't drink, the ta'am echad hamasubin kimlo lugmav, but someone else around the table who's fulfilling the obligation vicariously by listening and saying amen to the person making Kiddush, so I make Kiddush and I give the cup to someone else to drink, that would technically be yatsa. The Shulchan Aruch says that is okay, that you don't have to drink it according to this opinion. Even if you're making Kiddush for other people, you could give it to someone else. A tag team effort. I say the Kiddush, you drink the Kiddush. And according to this opinion, that person has to drink the whole melo lugmav. He can't drink a little and have somebody else drink a little. No. One person has to drink the melo lugmav, but it doesn't have to be me, the person reciting Kiddush. That he says, although it's true that only one person has to drink the Kiddush wine in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush for everyone at the table who listened, it's preferable, it's a mitzvah min hamuvchar, for everyone to drink some of the wine. That's the first opinion. V'yesh omrim dekevan sheben kulam ta'am luchin lo lugmav yatsu dishtias kulam mitzdarefes lechashir. Wow. Second opinion the Shulchan Aruch brings is maybe even more lenient than that. I don't need to drink the lo lugmav. You don't need to drink the lo lugmav. As long as together, everybody takes a little sip, and combined by having a sip, you took a sip, you took a sip, you took a sip, that gets to the shear of what a lo lugmav would have been, that could fulfill the obligation as well. Fascinating chiddush of the Shulchan Aruch, that even if no one person drinks the requisite amount, if together we did it, that adds up. There's a cumulative property here. Okay, the Hagaonim Sovrim, then he brings the third opinion of the Gaonim, She'im lo tam hamakadesh lo yatsa vera'oi lachosh lidivrehem vedavka b'kiddush. So the Shulchan Aruch says, now there's a third opinion of the Gaonim, right? The Gaonim, the early sages, who felt that, no, maybe it's not enough for someone else to drink the wine, and certainly not enough for us to together drink the requisite amount of wine. No, they're hardliners. They say the person who makes kiddush has to drink the kiddush, and he has to drink the malo lugmav. He has to drink that actual shikful amount. He can't just have a sip and have somebody else do a sip. So what do we see from here? Three different opinions who has to drink the wine. The most strict opinion holds the person making kiddush has to drink the wine and the full amount of the wine, the malo lugmav himself, and that's how we try to be machmir for. But good to know there are two other opinions. One other opinion says one person has to drink a malo lugmav, but it could be anyone at the table. You can give it to anybody else and they could fulfill it for you. And then the third opinion says no, not even one person has to drink it. You can divide it up so that everyone is having a little bit. And if, let's say, nobody likes wine at the table, so say, all right, each one of us will take a little sip, and together we do that. That could technically fulfill according to the third opinion. But the key principle for us that we saw was what the Shulchan Aruch wrote in the context of this discussion, that it says, Mikol makom mitzvah min hamuvchar shi'it amu kula. That although technically speaking, you can fulfill the mitzvah of kiddush by listening to someone else who's holding the cup and they drink it, and you don't have to drink anything. A lot of people don't know this. You can fulfill kiddush without actually drinking. Nonetheless, it's a preferable thing. It's a mitzvah min hamuvchar. It enhances the mitzvah if everyone gets to drink a little bit of it. So that's the key principle number one, is that we see the shiur of how much one has to drink, who has to drink, and then critically, everyone should drink. It's preferable to drink, even though they don't have to drink. Okay, let's take a look in Seif Tes Zayin. We'll skip ahead to number 16. Lo yit'amu hamasubin kodem shi'itam hamakadesh. Let's actually skip this. Avalim hayu lahim kosos yayin she'enan pagumim rashayin lishtos kodem she'yishte hamakadesh. That if people around the table have a little cup, let's say like a shot glass size, not a full kiddush cup, that it's filled with grape juice or wine ahead of time, before kiddush, and they have that in front of them while kiddush is being recited by the, let's say, the head of the household, then even if the person saying kiddush didn't pour into their cups from his kiddush cup, that's okay. They can drink from that, and that fulfills this hiddur, this mitzvah min hamuvchar, this preferable aspect that everyone should be drinking. So that's another kiddush. I might have thought that if we're going to say everyone has to drink kiddush wine, well, kiddush wine means the wine from the kiddush cup. And if you have just a little shot glass, it doesn't have a reviz. It's not enough. If you weren't listening to me holding this, then your kiddush on that wouldn't count. It's not on enough wine. Nonetheless, because it's connected to this kiddush, because I'm saying kiddush for everybody, and you're silently listening, but you have this little amount of grape juice in front of you, that counts to be considered you're drinking from kiddush wine. It gets included. It piggybacks along, if you will, with my big kiddush cup. And in fact, the Mishnah Berurah writes elsewhere in Siman Kuf Tzadi that this cup, even though it doesn't have a shiur, it doesn't have the right amount, it's a small shot glass, nonetheless, that counts as a kos shel bracha. That has a status, the halachos, of a cup of blessing, and that would be fine to fulfill the obligation as well. And the Shulchan Aruch spells this out again in Seif Yud Zayin. In tzarich lishpoch mikos hamakadesh lekosos yayin shelifnei hamasubin. You do not have to pour grape juice to everybody. Everybody should drink grape juice or wine, but it's okay if they had it from beforehand, if it didn't come from the actual kiddush cup itself. But elayim kein hayu figumin. However, he says that if the only time that I will have to actually add wine or grape juice to someone's small shot glass of wine that they have in front of them while they're listening to my kiddush, the only time I'd have to do that is if their wine is pagum. What does pagum mean? So pagum technically means flawed wine. Wine that is on some level not ideal for Kiddush. What makes something pagum? How do we judge wine as being flawed? So this is a whole discussion, and there is what to say about it, of various opinions. But generally speaking, the basic halacha of pagum, of a kos pagum, means that if anyone drank from a cup of wine or grape juice, now that cup someone has drank from, now you're not supposed to use that for Kiddush. That remaining wine that's left over, it's flawed wine. It's not ideal, and you shouldn't do it. Does that mean you have to throw it out? There's nothing you can ever use it for Kiddush? So we say, no, there's an easy way to fix a kos pagum. There's an easy way to fix it. It's just, and again, it's machlokes exactly what to do, but let's say I drank from this cup and now it's pagum. I just add a little bit of grape juice in, that's non-pagum grape juice into it, and now the whole thing is okay. You fixed it. So when it comes to Kiddush, we do not want to use wine that is pagum. If you do, it counts. The Kiddush is still valid, but it's certainly not ideal. One should always try to avoid wine that's pagum. And what we're seeing from the Shulchan Aruch here is that not only is important that in the Kiddush cup, when I'm saying Kiddush for everybody, that this wine not be pagum, but that also the wine that you are all drinking, even though you didn't have to be drinking wine in the first place, like we said, right? Nobody requires everyone to drink the wine. We said, as long as I drink it, you're all yotze. But we said it's a mitzvah min hamuvchar. It enhances the mitzvah for everybody to drink their own wine, to drink his or her own wine. And therefore, we'd say that if you're going to drink your small shot glass, you didn't have to be doing it, but if you're going to do it, try to make it that wine is also not pagum. And if it happens to be pagum, if you have a shot glass that somebody for some reason drank from before, earlier that afternoon, then the person should make sure to pour in, to fix the pagima so that it is good for Kiddush, right? And so that is another important principle. Again, we're just gathering the principles. Right now, it probably feels a little disjointed, and then we'll put them together to try to come up with what is the protocol that we should follow in order to hit all these goals. So far, what are our goals? Well, our goals are that everyone should be drinking some wine. We've seen that their wine, that they can hold it from before Kiddush. It doesn't have to be poured by me, but I can, and that their wine should not be pagum, meaning that just like my wine shouldn't be pagum, I shouldn't use in my cup wine that somebody's drunk from already. So too with them, we should not be having them drinking from cups that somebody had already drank from. And that's the issue of pagum. Now, on the topic of pagum, there's a fascinating chiddush that the Sharatzion brings from the Rosh in Sif Katan Hey Tes, where the Sharatzion writes that although it's true that a kos pagum, which we said is the type of wine you don't want to be using for Kiddush, it's flawed wine, somebody's drank from it already, it's not fit for the mitzvah ideally. Although that's true, there is an exception to the rule of pagum, and that is the following. If I make Kiddush, let's say, on wine that's totally fine, and now I drink from it, and I hand this very Kiddush cup to someone else, and they drink from it, that's not called drinking pagum wine. Didn't we just say pagum is when somebody drank from it? I just drank from it. How is that not pagum? So the answer is pagum wine, according to the Rosh, is when you drink from it and then you pour it out into someone else's cup. Now that wine has become pagum, and they really shouldn't use that for Kiddush optimally. But if it's still in the same cup that the Kiddush was made on, I'm passing my actual Kiddush cup around rather than pouring it out, this cup is impervious to pagima. That as long as the wine is in here, it is protected from becoming pagum. And therefore, if I drink and then I hand this to someone else to drink, technically, they're still fulfilling the ideal form of drinking wine that is not pagum. Everybody understand that? That's a tricky idea. So again, pagima normally means that if someone drinks from it, it flaws the wine and nobody else can use it, but we're modifying that. The Rosh says it's only a problem of pagima. It only becomes pagum, flawed wine, if you drink from it and then you pour it out to other people. Then that wine that you poured is not ideal for them to fulfill their mitzvah of Kiddush with. But if you drink from it and you hand that very cup, then it is still protected from being pagum. Okay, now take a look. One final principle, as we're gathering all the different sources and the different requirements that we're going to have to keep in mind so that we can then come up with a good game plan of what to do on Friday night, is what the Mishnah Berurah quotes in Seif Katan Nun Aleph from the Magen Avraham, that the Mishnah Berurah says that what about when it comes to drinking the wine? Let's say forget about passing it out. Is there any detail, are there any suggestions for how the person who made Kiddush, what he should be drinking? So what do I mean? So if you think about it, you could do one of two things after you make Kiddush. You could drink from the Kiddush cup itself that has a revius of wine in it, or you might think, well, I'll make Kiddush and I'll pour off a little bit into a malo lugmav, into a shot glass for me, and I'll drink that, and that will fulfill my obligation. So the Mishnah Berurah says that's not optimal to do, to pour it out of this cup into a smaller cup that contains the malo lugmav and to fulfill from there. Why? So take a look. He quotes Magen Avram Hiskim Ladas HaTosfos. Techos shel chova tzarich lios hateima davka mikos sheyesh bo revi'is yayin. So he says, when you are drinking the wine and you're fulfilling the mitzvah of Kiddush by drinking this wine, so you should drink it from a cup that has a revi'is of wine in it. In other words, everybody else at the table, they're drinking a mitzvah min hamuvchar, right? We said it's a nice thing for them to do. They don't have to be drinking, so they can drink from a little shot glass that has a little bit of wine. But you, not only should you make Kiddush on this full thing, you should drink from this full thing as well. That you shouldn't pour out a little bit for yourself and drink from that, then you're drinking from a small amount. You should fulfill the mitzvah by drinking from the big cup. So just to review, what have we seen so far? Let's put all these different pieces together, and hopefully things will start to become clear. We saw, first of all, not everybody has to drink, but it's preferable for everybody to drink some amount on Friday night. But the person making Kiddush, he has to drink, right? He really should be the one, ideally, to drink the malo lugmav, the cheekful, to fulfill the obligation for everyone else. We've seen that it's called the drinking Kiddush wine, even if you're not actually drinking the Kiddush wine, even if you have your own little shot glass that was never being held by the Makadesh, nonetheless, that's still called Kiddush wine. We've seen that it is preferable that, certainly for the person making Kiddush, that his wine should not be pugum, it should not have been previously sipped from by anyone. But the truth is, even for the people around the table, who, as we said, don't have to be drinking, but if they are going to drink, when they get their wine, it shouldn't be wine that has been drunk from already. We've seen that if you're drinking from the actual Kiddush cup itself, then you're not going to render it pugum. In other words, I'm drinking and then I give the cup to someone else to drink, that's technically okay. The problem is if I drink and now I pour out into smaller cups, well, that wine that I poured out is coming from this cup that I drink from. That's now going to be pugum. That's the shita of the Rosh. And we saw the opinion of the Magen Avram and the Mishnah Berurah that ideally, if possible, the person making Kiddush should drink from the cup, the Kiddush cup itself that has the revius of wine. He shouldn't just pour off a little bit for himself to drink, because he's drinking out of a smaller cup as opposed to the full cup that has the revius. So, if we think about that, where does that leave us? What are the implications of this when it comes to how we finish our Kiddush on Friday night? So what should emerge is that one method that is commonly done that would not be optimal is for you to make Kiddush, to drink from the Kiddush cup, and then to pour out cups for everybody around the table. Why is that not optimal? Because when you're drinking from the Kiddush cup, you've drunk and now you pour it out, that could render it pugum. So you're giving pugum wine that's been drunk from, to everyone else, and that's not optimal. And so again, that's something many people do. Obviously from a sanitary perspective, certainly in the era of COVID, that probably wouldn't be ideal. But even if you are Hamish and we're all friends here, I'm gonna drink and I'm gonna pour out from my cup, nonetheless, that wouldn't be optimal when it comes to Kiddush. So that should be clear. The other thing that we saw that wouldn't be optimal is for you to take your Kiddush cup, say, Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos, pour out a little bit for yourself, drink that, and then pour for everybody else. Why is that no good? Why is that not optimal? So that's not preferable, as we saw, because when you take this cup and you pour it out, so you're not giving anybody pugum wine, right? That's okay, because you didn't drink from it. But the problem is with you. You're drinking from a little nebuch cup rather than drinking from the kos shel bracha that had the revius that the bracha was made on. That would be more of a hither. And so those are two ways that are commonly done that really would not be optimal, especially that second way, pouring off a little and you sip and then you pour out to everybody else. That really is not ideal. So where does that leave us? What would be some of the things that we could do to fulfill this mitzvah in the optimal way? So one possibility is you could just fill up everybody's cup beforehand. As we said, that was the chiddush of the Shulchan Aruch, that even though they're not drinking from the actual wine that you made kiddush on, because they have their wine while you're making kiddush, it's out, it's in their cup, that wine gets included in my kiddush, and it's as if they're drinking kiddush wine. Is there any problem of they're drinking pugum wine? No, nobody drank from there. You've solved the pugum problem, and you've gotten everybody a legitimate, valid kiddush wine. That would be one very reasonable way of making kiddush ahead of time. A second possibility of what one could do is to say Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos. Pour out a little bit before you make the bracha, before you drink, because if you drink, then it's going to become pagum. But pour out a little bit, and that's going to be in a pitcher that you can now give to everybody else after. But you pour out from there, and then you drink while there still is a lot of grape juice or wine left in this cup. There's more than a revi'is left. Now you drink a malo lugamav from this cup. Again, let's think about what are our concerns. We were afraid about an issue of pagum wine. There's no issue of pagum wine. You poured it out to them before you drank. And your wine is obviously not pagum. Nobody's drinking from yours. And everyone is going to get to drink legitimate kiddush wine. So that should be fine as well. That would be another legitimate way, as long as you pour it off. And furthermore, you're drinking from the cup that kiddush was made on that has this revi'is in it, rather than you pouring off for yourself and giving everybody else to drink, to pour from this cup. Hope that makes sense. That's a second option. A third possibility would be, remember we said, is pagima, is that you're done? There's nothing to do, no way to fix it? We said, no, like salvageable. Efshar l'taken, and everything in life you can fix. And so you have this pagum wine. You let's say you made kiddush and you drank it. Now you want to pour it out. Well, you can't pour it out because if you pour it out, it's going to become pagum. So we said, oh, well, you can fix it. Mekadesh HaShabbos, you took a sip or you took a malo lugma. Now add in a little bit more from the bottle of wine on the table. Pour a little bit more in. What does that accomplish? You now have kiddush wine that's been rectified. It's no longer pagum, and you can now hand it. You can now pour it around or hand it around, and everybody pours for themselves. And Shalom al Yisrael. There's no pagum wine, and they're drinking legitimate kiddush wine, and you drink from the actual kosher bracha, from the revi'is. That is the third possibility. And then the fourth possibility would be perhaps the most Hamish option, which is you drink from the kiddush cup and then pass the kiddush cup around, and everybody could take a sip out of there. Why does that work? So again, let's think, what are our requirements? We want everybody to be drinking kiddush wine. Well, they're getting kiddush wine. Doesn't get more kiddush wine than that. And we don't want people to be drinking pagum wine that has been drunk from before. So isn't that a problem? I drank from this already. So that's where you have to remember the opinion of the Rosh that we saw in the Sha'ar Tziyun, that no, I drank from it, but I'm not pouring it out into another cup. That would render it pagum. Rather, I drank from it, and I'm giving you to drink from it, and you drink from it. As long as you're drinking from this original cup, there's no problem of it being pagum. So we have, again, four possibilities. Either fill up the cups in advance, and have everybody just drink their own cup, and that's very easy to do. Sometimes it's not as simple. People don't think to do that in advance. So then you could pour it out before you drink, pour out a little bit into a pitcher, and then you could add more grape juice into that. And you drink from the kiddush cup that has the revi'is of wine in it. And therefore, there's no problem with pagima. You can drink from it and then just fix the wine by adding a little bit of grape juice in and then distribute it to everybody. Or finally, just drink from the cup and hand the actual cup. Don't pour it out. When you pour it out, you run into problems of pagima. But as long as you just give the actual cup, that would be sufficient. So the question is, we've seen four possible ways of handling this kiddush wine. Is there a preferential way? Any one of those four would be fine, but what do the poskim say would be ideal? And so here, we saw in the Shiur, the opinion of Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, brought in Sefer Shulchan Shlomo, in Reish Ayin Aleph. So they say, L'shoel ha'ich linhog b'kos shel bracha. So how do you deal with the kos shel bracha? Like for example, of kiddush. So Heishiv Maran, Shlomo Zalman responded, L'chatchila nifsak shekulam yishtu me'oso hakos. He says the most preferable way of the four ways that we saw that would be the ideal of how to distribute Kiddush wine. The ideal of the ideal, if you will, is that everybody should drink from the actual Kiddush cup itself. So I make Kiddush, I drink, and then I hand the Kiddush cup to you, and the Kiddush cup to you, and the Kiddush cup to you. And by that way, we do the mitzvah min ha-muvchar. Everyone drink from the actual Kiddush wine. And two, there's no problem of pegima. It's not pagum wine because it all stayed in this cup. It was never poured out. And he says, because of b'chai gavna ein chisaron shel pegima. There's no problem of pegima, as we saw from the Rosh. However, it says, let's say you don't want to do that, right? For hygienic reasons, you don't want to drink and give the cup for everybody to drink. Yishpoch techila. He says, first, you should pour out a little bit. Achar shemikadesh bekodem sheshoses hayayin. So before you take a sip, do, I think we called it option number 2, where you pour out into a pitcher, and then you drink, and then you can give it out. But he says, so he says, like the Magen Avraham we saw, that it's okay to pour out, but you want to make sure that you still have a revi'is of wine that you're going to drink the malo lugmav from that. That's the nicest way to do the mitzvah. Don't just drink a malo lugmav from a malo lugmav. No, leave a revi'is in there. Let's say maybe up to here, and drink that, and drink from that. From the original cup is the best way to do it, it seems. However, it says, let's say you have many guests, where you don't have enough wine for you to be able to pour out a little bit for them and to have a revi'is left over. Yishtehu tchila, he says, in that case, you should drink first. So drink, have a malo lugma, the cheekful, and then add in more wine, and you will fix the pigima. And he says, why? This is the ikar mitzvah kol shabracha lishtos me'osakos shabarchu alav. He brings a proof from Avraham Avinu, right? The incident at the beginning of Parshas Vayera, where Chazal say that Avraham wanted to send the kos shabracha. He wanted to send the actual cup, and then we see from there that maybe of the 4 ways that we saw, any one of them would be fine, but the optimal way would be for you to drink and then everybody to drink from this cup. We also saw the Shulchan Aruch Harav in Siman Kuf Tzavi. These are all in the Mari Makomos that are given out, the source sheets that are given to everybody in the program. So he says, even though it's preferable that everybody present should drink from the bracha, from the kos shel bracha, in sarich litam mikos hamavarich. You don't have to drink from the actual cup of the mavarich. Ela yachol kol echad litin koso lefanav. So everyone can have their own cup in front of them, like we saw. I think we called that option number 1. Right? He says that's fine. V'yoser tov lasos kenim efshar. He says that's the preferable way. Lefishakos hamavarich upagum leachar sheshasa mimeno hamavarich. So he says that although you could do other things, he says that's the best way. And everybody has wine from the beginning, even before Kiddush in front of them, and they just drink their wine without any pouring going on, because he says that there the kos hamavarich would become pagum if you drank from it. And even though you're right, he says you could drink and fix it, so by adding more wine, שכשיש לפני כל אחד ואחד כוסו בשעת ברכת המזון, הרי כולם הם כוסות של ברכה כמו כוס המברך. So he says that although you could add more wine, and he says it's better that everybody, if they have their own little cup, like we saw from the Mishnah Berurah in Kuf Tzavi, that's considered like they're drinking directly from a kos shel bracha. It's not a real kos shel bracha in the sense it's small. The real kos, like we said, has to hold the revi'is. But because I'm doing it with the revi'is, their little cup can tag along and get included in that as well. And so again, the Shulchan Aruch Harav seems to think that it might be preferable to fill up the cups of everybody around the table, and they all just drink their own cups right after you make the bracha, because they're called a kos shel bracha. Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach thought that maybe it's best to pass the actual cup around if possible. But halacha l'maisa, any one of these 4 minhagim would fulfill the mitzvah in an optimal fashion, and many poskim, different poskim point to different approaches. You're probably not going to go wrong with any one of them. Again, just to review, this issue of how to pour out the cup even if you didn't do it, even if you drink and then you poured it out for other people, which we said is not a great option because the wine becomes pagum when you drink and pour it out, even that fulfills the mitzvah. But we're talking about how to do it in the most optimal fashion. And again, what did we see? 4 different possible ways that will nail all of the requirements that we outlined. The requirements were we want everyone to be able to drink. We want them to have Kiddush wine, and we want them to have Kiddush wine that is not pagum. And we said that you could accomplish that in various ways. You could have everybody just holding a little cup of wine in front of them, and that attains the status of a kos shel bracha that's called Kiddush wine, which is a Kiddush. I would have thought it's not from my cup, but no, because they're listening to my Kiddush, even though they're silent, it's tantamount to them reciting Kiddush, Shamea Ka'oneh, and therefore it's as if their Kiddush was said on a legitimate kos shel bracha, and it's not pagum wine. Or you can pour out the wine before you drink from it, or you can drink from it and fix the wine, or you can drink from it and hand out the kos itself. As I mentioned before, although any one of these is valid, and on some level you might say, why go into so much detail? I think you see from here a beautiful example of how this brings your Kiddush to life. And it's not obsessive, it's not nitpicky, it gives you an opportunity to show your love for the mitzvah, chavivus ha-mitzvah, to do it in the ultimate optimal fashion. And this is what the program is all about. It's about instilling that love, that passion of wanting to do everything lechatchila when we can, in the optimal way, to have the knowledge in order to do it, and to have the love and the passion, and to spread that to everyone else. So if you're not a part of it, I invite you to join wherever you're located. There hopefully should be a chabura near you. If there's not, you should contact Rav Eliada. You can go to the SCP website. If you just Google Smichas Chaver program, it'll come right up. And I know that he's always looking to expand and to help people get in some way. But I encourage you to join us. And Halavai should continue to learn together and to be Mekayim, the Hilchos Shabbos, in the optimal way, the mitzvah min hamuvchar, and to continue to go Michael El Chai.